In a quiet, picturesque suburban neighborhood, where tree-lined streets and well-manicured lawns defined the landscape, life usually moved at a slow and predictable pace. The air was often filled with the sounds of birds chirping in the mornings, kids playing after school, and families enjoying barbecues on weekends. It was the kind of place where people prided themselves on knowing their neighbors, waving hello as they passed by, and keeping an eye out for one another's homes when someone went on vacation. But beneath this veneer of calmness and community lay tensions that sometimes simmered just below the surface, tensions rooted in prejudice, misunderstanding, and fear. The Thompson family had recently moved into the neighborhood, bringing with them hopes of starting fresh in a new environment. Marcus, Angela, and their two children, 10-year-old Mia and 7-year-old Elijah, had spent months searching for the perfect home. When they finally found it, they couldn't have been happier. The house was spacious, yet cozy, with large windows that let sunlight pour in during the day and a backyard big enough for the kids to play in. For the Thompsons, it wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of stability, success, and the promise of a brighter future. They eagerly unpacked boxes, decorated rooms, and imagined all the memories they would create within those walls. But not everyone shared their excitement about their arrival. Across the street lived Carol Hargrove, an elderly woman who had resided in the neighborhood for over 3 decades. Carol was known for being outspoken and opinionated, traits that made her both admired and avoided by her neighbors. She took great pride in maintaining her immaculate garden, attending local events, and staying informed about everything happening around her. To many, she seemed like a harmless, if somewhat nosy figure. However, beneath her polished exterior lay deeply ingrained biases that shaped how she viewed the world and the people in it. From the moment the moving truck pulled up in front of the Thompsons' new home, Carol watched from behind her curtains with narrowed eyes. At first, she told herself that her unease stemmed from curiosity. After all, change could be unsettling, especially in a neighborhood as close-knit as theirs. But as she observed the family unloading furniture and setting up their belongings, her discomfort grew. She noticed Marcus's tall frame and confident demeanor, Angela's warm smile as she directed the movers, and the laughter of their children as they explored their new surroundings. There was nothing unusual or threatening about any of it, but to Carol something felt off. It wasn't long before Carol began voicing her concerns to anyone who would listen. During her weekly coffee dates with other neighbors, she casually mentioned how the new family seemed different from everyone else on the block. She described their music as too loud, their car as too flashy, and their presence as out of place. Her comments were subtle enough to avoid outright confrontation, but carried undertones that hinted at deeper prejudices. Some neighbors nodded politely, eager to avoid conflict, while others dismissed her remarks altogether. Still, Carol persisted, convinced that her instincts were right. Things came to a head one Friday evening when Marcus decided to host a small gathering in his backyard. He invited a few friends from work and some neighbors he'd met since moving in, hoping to foster connections and build relationships. The atmosphere was lively but relaxed, with the smell of grilled food wafting through the air and the sound of laughter echoing across the yard. Marcus stood near the grill, flipping burgers and sharing stories with his guests, while Angela mingled with the crowd, making sure everyone felt welcome. Their children played tag with the other kids, their giggles adding to the cheerful ambiance. Carol, however, saw none of this warmth or camaraderie. From her living room window, she peered out at the scene unfolding across the street. To her, the gathering was anything but friendly. The music playing softly in the background sounded intrusive to her ears, and the sight of people laughing and talking late into the evening confirmed her worst suspicions. In her mind, the Thompsons weren't simply hosting a casual get-together. They were disrupting the peace and order of the neighborhood. Her resentment bubbled over, and without stopping to consider the consequences, she picked up her phone and dialed 911. When the police arrived, red and blue lights flashing against the darkening sky, the mood shifted instantly. Conversations halted, and heads turned toward the patrol cars pulling up to the curb. Marcus stepped forward to greet the officers, his expression calm but wary. He introduced himself and explained that they were simply having a barbecue with friends, a normal weekend activity for most families. Angela joined him, holding little Elijah close to her side, her eyes reflecting a mix of frustration and disbelief. The officers surveyed the scene, noting the absence of any real disturbance, and exchanged a few words with Marcus before leaving. Though the incident ended quickly, its impact lingered. Word spread rapidly through the neighborhood, sparking murmurs of disapproval and concern. Some residents sympathized with the Thompsons, recognizing the unfairness of what had happened. Others, however, echoed Carol's sentiments, whispering about how the family didn't quite fit in. Meanwhile, Carol sat alone in her dimly lit living room, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. She had done what she believed was necessary, but deep down a nagging thought began to form. What if she had been wrong? Little did Carol know her actions would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew, not only about the Thompsons, but also about herself. The night the police visited the Thompsons' home left an indelible mark on the neighborhood. While Marcus and Angela handled the situation with grace, the underlying tension was palpable. The next morning, as the sun rose over the quiet streets, whispers began to circulate among the residents. Neighbors who had previously greeted each other warmly now exchanged cautious glances, unsure of how to address what had happened. Some felt sympathy for the Thompsons, recognizing the unfairness of being targeted simply for hosting a harmless gathering. Others, however, remained silent, unwilling to challenge Carol's perspective or acknowledge the discomfort her actions had caused. For Carol Hargrove, the aftermath of her call to the police brought a mix of emotions she hadn't anticipated. At first, she told herself that she had done the right thing. After all, wasn't it her duty as a resident to report anything that seemed out of the ordinary? She replayed the events of the previous evening in her mind, convincing herself that the noise and activity at the Thompsons' house warranted intervention. Yet as the hours passed, doubt began to creep in. Memories of the officers leaving without incident gnawed at her conscience. If there had truly been a problem, wouldn't they have stayed longer? Wouldn't they have issued some kind of warning or citation? These questions lingered in her thoughts, refusing to be ignored. Meanwhile, life for the Thompson family continued much as it had before. Marcus woke up early the next day, kissed his wife and kids goodbye, and headed off to work. As a trauma surgeon, his days were often long and demanding, filled with high-stakes decisions and critical moments. Despite the challenges, he approached his job with unwavering dedication, driven by a desire to make a difference in people's lives. Back at home, Angela juggled caring for their children and working on her latest book, a project she poured her heart into. Her stories celebrated diversity, kindness, and the power of understanding, themes inspired by her own experiences growing up in a world not always welcoming to those who looked like her. Despite their busy schedules, neither Marcus nor Angela let the incident overshadow their optimism. They chose to focus on the positive aspects of their new life in the neighborhood. Over the following weeks, they made efforts to connect with their neighbors, inviting them over for coffee or stopping to chat during evening walks. Their warmth and sincerity slowly began to break down barriers, earning them the respect and admiration of several families. Children from nearby homes started visiting Mia and Elijah, eager to play games or share snacks. Even some adults warmed up to the idea of befriending the Thompsons, realizing that their initial reservations had been misplaced. But Carol remained distant, clinging stubbornly to her convictions. Though she occasionally caught glimpses of the Thompsons interacting with others, she dismissed these interactions as superficial or insincere. To her, their friendliness was a facade, a way to win people over and mask their true intentions. Determined to prove her suspicions correct, she decided to dig deeper. Using social media and online searches, she began researching the family, hoping to uncover evidence that would validate her distrust. Her investigation started innocently enough. She typed Marcus Thompson into a search engine, curious to see what information might surface. Within seconds, dozens of results appeared, ranging from professional profiles to news articles. One link caught her attention immediately. A headline praising Marcus for his heroic actions during a mass casualty event years earlier. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she clicked on the article. As she read through the details, her eyes widened in disbelief. The story described how Marcus, then serving as a military medic, had risked his life to save dozens of injured soldiers under enemy fire. His bravery had earned him multiple awards and commendations, cementing his reputation as a selfless and courageous individual. Carol sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This revelation contradicted everything she thought she knew about Marcus. How could someone so decorated and honorable fit the narrative she had constructed in her head? Shaking off her unease, she continued her search, determined to find more. Another article led her to Angela's profile, highlighting her success as an author and educator. Photos showed Angela speaking at schools, leading workshops, and signing copies of her best-selling children's books. Carol watched videos of Angela discussing the importance of empathy and representation in literature, her words resonating deeply with audiences of all ages. Each discovery chipped away at Carol's preconceived notions, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about her biases. As days turned into weeks, Carol found herself unable to shake the feeling that she had made a grave mistake. The image of the Thompsons she had built in her mind, an image rooted in fear and prejudice, was crumbling before her eyes. In its place stood two individuals whose accomplishments and character far exceeded anything she could have imagined. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that she had misjudged them entirely. But acknowledging this realization was only the beginning. Now came the harder part, deciding what to do about it. One evening, as Carol sat alone in her living room, the weight of her guilt became too much to bear. She replayed the scene of the police arriving at the Thompsons' door, imagining how frightened Angela must have felt, holding her young son while explaining the situation to the officers. She thought about Marcus, standing calmly, despite the intrusion, likely aware of the motivations behind the call. And she thought about herself, her role in perpetuating harm and division within a community she claimed to care about. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the extent of the damage she had caused, not just to the Thompsons but to her own sense of integrity. That night, Carol wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she wanted to retreat further, into denial, pretending nothing was wrong and continuing as if the past few weeks had never happened. On the other hand, a small but persistent voice urged her to take responsibility for her actions, to face the Thompsons, apologize, and try to make amends. It was a daunting prospect, one that filled her with dread. What if they rejected her apology? What if her neighbors judged her harshly for admitting fault? These fears loomed large, but so did the knowledge that doing nothing would only prolong the pain she had inflicted. By the time dawn broke, Carol had reached a decision. She couldn't undo what she had done, but she could take steps toward healing the rift she had created. With trembling hands, she wrote a note reminding herself of the values she once held dear, values of fairness, honesty, and compassion. Then, taking a deep breath, she resolved to cross the street and knock on the Thompsons' door. Whatever happened next, she knew, would change her life forever. The morning after Carol Hargrove made her decision, the air in the neighborhood felt unusually still. It was one of those crisp autumn days where the sun shone brightly, but a cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. For Carol, however, the calm outside contrasted sharply with the storm brewing within her. She had spent hours rehearsing what she would say to the Thompsons, yet every time she imagined herself standing at their doorstep, doubt crept in. Would they even open the door? And if they did, how could she possibly put into words the weight of her remorse? Despite her fears, Carol knew she couldn't delay any longer. If she waited too long, her courage might falter entirely. So, late that afternoon, she gathered her resolve, smoothed out her sweater, and stepped outside. Her heart pounded as she crossed the street, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time she reached the Thompsons' front porch, her palms were clammy and her throat felt dry. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the cheerful wreath hanging on their door, a stark reminder of the warmth and kindness she had so carelessly dismissed. Summoning every ounce of bravery, Carol knocked gently. Inside, Angela heard the soft rap and glanced toward the entrance, surprised to see who stood there when she opened the door. For a split second, both women froze, caught off guard by the unexpected encounter. Carol's face flushed red as she stammered an awkward greeting. "Hi, Angela. I'm sorry to bother you." Angela blinked, taken aback not just by Carol's presence but by the vulnerability etched across her features. Gone was the stern, judgmental demeanor Angela had, glimpsed from afar. Instead, she saw a woman visibly struggling with something profound. After a brief pause, Angela responded warmly, inviting Carol inside. "Of course, come in," she said, stepping aside. Though curious, and admittedly cautious, about this sudden visit, Angela couldn't ignore the sincerity in Carol's voice. As bold to you, Carol entered the living room. She noticed how welcoming the space felt. The walls were adorned with family photos, vibrant artwork, and shelves lined with books. A cozy couch sat near a large window where sunlight streamed in, casting golden hues across the room. Despite her anxiety, Carol found herself momentarily comforted by the homey atmosphere. Marcus, who had been reading in the corner, looked up and greeted her politely, though his expression remained guarded. Sensing the tension, Angela offered them both tea, hoping to ease the awkwardness. Once seated, Carol took a deep breath and began speaking. Her words came haltingly at first, but as she continued, they gained momentum. "I owe you both an apology," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What I did, calling the police on you, it was wrong. I let my own biases get the better of me, and I caused unnecessary trouble for your family. I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry." Her confession hung heavy in the air, filling the room with a silence so thick it seemed tangible. Angela exchanged a glance with Marcus, whose brow furrowed slightly as he processed Carol's words. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Angela leaned forward, her tone measured but kind. "Thank you for coming here today, Carol," she said softly. "That must have taken a lot of courage." Encouraged by Angela's response, Carol pressed on. "I've been doing some research about you two," she confessed, her cheeks reddening further. "I learned about Marcus's service and all the lives he saved, not just as a soldier but as a doctor too. And Angela, your work with children's books, it's inspiring. You're making such a positive impact on the world." She paused, shaking her head as if trying to reconcile these discoveries with her earlier assumptions. "I realize now that I judged you unfairly. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope someday you might." Marcus, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke. His voice was steady, though tinged with emotion. "It means a lot to hear you say that, Carol. We've faced situations like this before, and while it's never easy, we try to focus on understanding rather than resentment. People make mistakes, we're all human. What matters is learning from them." Carol nodded fervently, tears welling up in her eyes. "That's exactly what I want to do," she said. "I want to learn. I want to be better." Over the next hour, the conversation shifted from apologies to shared stories. Angela talked about growing up in a small town where opportunities for people of color were limited, describing how her love for storytelling helped her navigate challenges and inspire others. Marcus recounted his experiences in the military and as a trauma surgeon, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and compassion in saving lives. They spoke openly about the difficulties they'd faced due to racism and prejudice, but also about the strength and resilience they'd gained along the way. Carol listened intently, absorbing every word. For the first time, she saw the Thompsons, not as strangers or symbols of difference, but as individuals with rich histories, dreams, and struggles. Their vulnerability touched her deeply, breaking down the final barriers of resistance she had clung to for so long. By the end of the evening, Carol felt a glimmer of hope, not just for reconciliation with the Thompsons, but for personal growth as well. Before leaving, Carol expressed her gratitude once more. "Thank you for giving me this chance," she said earnestly. "You didn't have to let me in tonight, but you did. That says a lot about the kind of people you are." Angela smiled gently, assuring her that forgiveness was always possible when approached with honesty and humility. As Carol walked back across the street, she realized something remarkable. The burden of guilt she had carried for weeks had begun to lift. In its place was a newfound determination to change, not just for herself but for the community she called home. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Carol understood that healing required effort from everyone involved. Little did she know her decision to confront her mistakes would ripple outward, inspiring others in the neighborhood to reflect on their own attitudes and actions. The seeds of transformation had been planted, and they would soon blossom into something far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The days following Carol Hargrove's visit to the Thompsons' home marked a turning point not just for her, but for the entire neighborhood. Word of her apology spread quickly, though not in the gossipy or malicious way one might expect. Instead, it was Angela and Marcus who chose to share the story with a few close neighbors during casual conversations. They framed it not as an indictment of Carol's character, but as an example of growth and redemption, a reminder that even those who make mistakes can take steps toward change. Their generosity in speaking positively about Carol surprised many, including Carol herself, who had braced for judgment and ostracism. As people began talking about what had happened, curiosity turned into reflection. Some residents admitted they had shared Carol's initial reservations about the Thompsons, while others confessed they had stayed silent out of discomfort or fear of confrontation. These discussions sparked deeper conversations about biases, assumptions, and the importance of getting to know someone before forming opinions. Slowly, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted from guarded politeness to genuine interest in understanding one another better. Carol, meanwhile, found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, she felt immense relief after unburdening herself and receiving forgiveness from the Thompsons. For years, she had let stereotypes and unfounded fears dictate how she interacted with others, particularly those different from her. Now she saw clearly how these attitudes had isolated her, not just from the Thompsons but from opportunities to connect with so many other neighbors as well. Yet, alongside this clarity came moments of self-doubt. Could she really change? Would her efforts be enough to repair the harm she had caused? Determined to prove her sincerity, Carol threw herself into learning more about the Thompsons and their contributions to society. She attended a local book signing event where Angela was promoting her latest children's book, which celebrated diversity and encouraged young readers to embrace differences. Sitting quietly in the back of the room, Carol listened intently as Angela read aloud passages filled with warmth and wisdom. Parents and children alike hung on every word, their faces lighting up with excitement and recognition. When the session ended, Carol approached Angela hesitantly, praising her work and thanking her for creating stories that fostered empathy and inclusion. Angela smiled warmly, acknowledging Carol's effort with a nod of encouragement. Inspired by Angela's message, Carol decided to volunteer at one of her workshops aimed at teaching educators how to incorporate diverse perspectives into their classrooms. At first, she felt out of place among the teachers and librarians who attended, unsure if she belonged in such a progressive setting. But Angela welcomed her warmly, explaining that everyone had something valuable to contribute, regardless of where they were on their journey toward understanding. Over time, Carol grew more comfortable, participating in group activities and sharing insights from her own experiences. The workshop became a safe space for her to ask questions, challenge old beliefs, and gain tools to combat prejudice, not just in herself, but in others too. Simultaneously, Carol sought ways to support Marcus's initiatives in the community. She learned that he frequently volunteered at a nearby veterans center, offering medical advice and mentorship to former service members struggling with reintegration into civilian life. Though initially hesitant to reach out, Carol eventually mustered the courage to visit the center, bringing homemade cookies as a small gesture of goodwill. To her surprise, the veterans greeted her warmly, eager to hear about her connection to Marcus. As they shared stories of resilience and camaraderie, Carol realized how much she had underestimated the strength and humanity of those who served their country. By the end of her visit, she felt inspired to get involved further, perhaps helping organize events or fundraisers to support the center's mission. Back in the neighborhood, Carol's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Her newfound openness and willingness to engage earned her respect from neighbors who had once viewed her with suspicion. Families invited her over for dinner, eager to introduce her to dishes from cultures she had never explored before. Children waved hello enthusiastically, thrilled when she joined them for impromptu games of tag in the cul-de-sac. Even Mia and Elijah, the Thompson kids, started seeking her out, asking if she'd like to join their lemonade stand fundraisers or help decorate pumpkins for Halloween. Each interaction chipped away at the walls she had built around herself, replacing isolation with connection. One evening, as Carol sat on her porch watching the sunset, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. What had once been a source of bitterness, her call to the police, had become a catalyst for growth both personally and collectively. She thought about the Thompsons, whose grace and forgiveness had opened doors she never knew existed. She thought about Angela's workshops, Marcus's dedication to healing, and the countless individuals she had met along the way who reminded her of the beauty and diversity. Most importantly, she thought about the responsibility she now carried to continue challenging her biases and advocating for inclusivity in every corner of her life. Though Carol knew she still had much to learn, she no longer feared the process. Every step forward brought new lessons, new friendships, and new reasons to hope. And as she looked out at the neighborhood bathed in golden light, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for second chances, but for the power of compassion, to bridge divides and transform lives. What Carol didn't realize yet was that her journey was inspiring others to embark on similar paths of self-discovery. Little by little, the ripple effects of her actions were reshaping the community, fostering an environment where everyone felt seen, valued, and heard. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Carol believed that real, lasting change was possible, and that together, they could build a future rooted in unity and understanding. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Carol Hargrove's transformation began to spread throughout the neighborhood in ways no one could have anticipated. What started as a personal journey of redemption for Carol evolved into a collective awakening for the entire community. People who had once kept their distance from the Thompsons, or worse, harbored similar biases, began to see them in a new light. Conversations that were once avoided or brushed under the rug now became opportunities for connection and understanding. Carol, emboldened by her growing relationships with Angela, Marcus, and their children, took it upon herself to organize events aimed at fostering inclusivity and breaking down barriers. Her first initiative was modest: a weekend potluck dinner where neighbors were encouraged to bring dishes representing their cultural backgrounds. She reached out to Angela for advice on how to frame the event, ensuring it felt welcoming rather than performative. Angela enthusiastically supported the idea, offering suggestions and even helping design flyers to promote the gathering. On the day of the potluck, tables lined the cul-de-sac, each laden with an array of foods from around the world. There were steaming plates of jollof rice from West Africa, fragrant curries from India, savory empanadas from Latin America, and classic American casseroles. Children darted between the tables, sampling everything they could reach, while adults mingled, exchanging stories about family recipes and traditions. For many residents, it was the first time they had tasted, or even heard of, some of these dishes. The shared experience created a sense of curiosity and appreciation, bridging gaps that had long existed unnoticed. Marcus stood near one of the tables, chatting with a group of neighbors about his time in the military and his work as a trauma surgeon. He spoke candidly about the challenges he faced balancing his career with family life, as well as the importance of mentorship and giving back to the community. His humility and humor put everyone at ease, and soon others joined the conversation, sharing their own professional and personal journeys. By the end of the evening, several people expressed interest in volunteering at the Veterans Center, where Marcus frequently worked, eager to contribute in whatever way they could. Meanwhile, Angela set up a small table displaying copies of her books, along with coloring sheets and activities for kids. Parents gathered around, flipping through the pages and asking questions about her writing process. One mother tearfully thanked Angela for creating stories that helped her biracial daughter feel seen and celebrated. Another neighbor, inspired by Angela's dedication to education, suggested starting a monthly book club focused on diverse authors and themes. Within days, a sign-up sheet circulated among the residents, and the first meeting was scheduled for the following week. At the center of it all was Carol, beaming with pride as she watched her neighbors come together. Though she still occasionally doubted whether her efforts were enough, the smiles and laughter surrounding her reassured her that progress was being made. More importantly, she saw how her actions had sparked a chain reaction. Neighbors who had previously been hesitant to engage with the Thompsons now sought them out, eager to learn more about their lives and contributions. Even those who hadn't attended the potluck expressed interest in future events, signaling a shift in attitudes across the board. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt within Carol herself. As she continued volunteering at Angela's workshops and participating in Marcus's veteran outreach programs, she discovered a passion for advocacy she never knew she possessed. She began attending local town hall meetings, speaking up about the need for greater diversity and inclusion in schools, libraries, and public spaces. Her voice, once tinged with judgment, now carried conviction and compassion, earning her nods of agreement from fellow attendees. Over time, she became a trusted figure in the community, not because of her past mistakes, but because of her unwavering commitment to making amends. One particularly poignant moment came during a school assembly, organized by Angela, where Marcus and several other veterans shared their experiences with students. Standing before a sea of young faces, Marcus recounted tales of courage and sacrifice, emphasizing the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. When he finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause, and Carol, sitting in the back row, wiped away tears. She realized then that the lessons Marcus imparted weren't just for the children, they were for her too. Every day presented another chance to do better, to be better. Back in the neighborhood, the spirit of collaboration continued to flourish. Families worked together to plant a community garden, filling it with flowers, herbs, and vegetables native to different parts of the world. Others formed walking groups, book clubs, and fitness classes, finding joy in shared hobbies and mutual support. Even holiday celebrations took on a new dimension, with decorations reflecting a blend of traditions and customs. Christmas lights twinkled alongside menorahs, and Diwali lanterns cast warm glows over front porches. Through it all, the Thompsons remained pillars of strength and inspiration. They welcomed every effort to connect, showing patience and kindness, even when old prejudices resurfaced. Their ability to forgive and embrace others served as a powerful reminder that change was possible, no matter how deeply rooted the problem might seem. By spring, the neighborhood bore little resemblance to the divided place it had been just months earlier. Friendships blossomed, trust grew, and a renewed sense of belonging permeated the air. Carol often found herself marveling at how far they had come. She thought back to the night she called the police, cringing at the memory of her ignorance and fear. Yet she also recognized how that moment had planted the seeds for something extraordinary, a movement toward unity and understanding. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, Carol knew the community was stronger for having faced them. Together, each person had played a role in shaping this new reality, from Marcus's quiet leadership to Angela's boundless creativity, from the children's laughter to the elders' wisdom. And as Carol looked out at the vibrant tapestry of lives intertwined, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for second chances, for forgiveness, and for the power of humanity to heal itself. The transformation of the neighborhood didn't happen overnight, but as the months rolled on, it became clear that something remarkable had taken root. What began with Carol Hargrove's apology to the Thompsons blossomed into a community-wide effort to embrace diversity, foster understanding, and celebrate differences. The once divided streets now buzzed with energy, laughter, and collaboration. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and awkwardness, but the overall shift was undeniable. People who had once kept their distance from one another now shared meals, stories, and even dreams for the future. One of the most significant changes came in the form of an annual event called Unity Day, which Carol spearheaded with help from Angela and Marcus. Inspired by the success of the potluck dinner, Unity Day was designed to bring everyone together through food, music, art, and storytelling. Held at the local park, the event featured booths showcasing different cultures, performances by local musicians and dancers, and workshops led by residents eager to share their skills or knowledge. Children ran freely between activities while adults exchanged recipes, gardening tips, and heartfelt conversations about their lives. On the first Unity Day, the air crackled with excitement. Families arrived carrying picnic blankets, lawn chairs, and dishes to contribute to the communal feast. A stage had been set up near the center of the park, where Angela gave a short speech about the importance of embracing diversity and learning from one another. Her words resonated deeply, drawing applause and nods of agreement from the crowd. When she finished speaking, Marcus took the microphone to introduce a panel of veterans, including himself, who shared stories of teamwork, resilience, and hope. Their words reminded everyone of the strength found in unity, even in the face of adversity. As the day unfolded, Carol stood back, watching the scene with quiet pride. She had spent countless hours planning every detail, from coordinating volunteers to arranging donations from local businesses. Though she initially worried about whether people would show up or take the event seriously, her fears melted away as she saw how much joy and connection it brought. Parents laughed over plates of unfamiliar foods, children painted colorful murals on long sheets of paper, and neighbors posed for photos in front of a giant "We Are One" banner strung across the park entrance. Even those who hadn't participated actively in previous efforts showed up, curious to see what all the fuss was about, and left smiling. But Unity Day wasn't just about fun and festivities. It also sparked meaningful discussions about how to keep building a more inclusive community. During one workshop, Angela led a session on teaching empathy to children, sharing strategies parents and educators could use to combat stereotypes and encourage kindness. In another corner of the park, Marcus facilitated a discussion about mental health and wellness, emphasizing the importance of supporting veterans and others struggling with trauma. Meanwhile, Carol hosted a table focused on overcoming bias, inviting attendees to write down questions or concerns they felt uncomfortable voicing aloud. By the end of the day, dozens of notes filled a jar, each one representing an opportunity for growth and dialogue. Over time, Unity Day became a cherished tradition, growing larger and more elaborate with each passing year. Local media outlets began covering the event, highlighting its impact not just on the neighborhood but on surrounding communities as well. Other towns started reaching out, asking for advice on how to replicate similar initiatives. Carol, Angela, and Marcus found themselves fielding calls and emails from organizers eager to learn from their experience. They gladly shared resources, ideas, and encouragement, knowing that change could spread far beyond their little corner of the world. Back in the neighborhood, the spirit of collaboration continued to thrive long after Unity Day ended. New friendships formed, old grudges dissolved, and projects aimed at improving the community sprang up everywhere. Neighbors came together to repaint the playground equipment, install solar-powered lights along walking paths, and create a free library stocked with books donated by residents. Kids organized bake sales to raise money for charity, while adults planned trips to volunteer at shelters and food banks. Every act, big or small, reinforced the idea that they were stronger when they worked as a team. For Carol, the journey had been transformative in ways she never imagined. She no longer saw herself as merely a resident of the neighborhood. She saw herself as part of something greater, a movement toward healing and progress. Her relationship with the Thompsons deepened, evolving from tentative acquaintanceship to genuine friendship. Angela often joked that Carol had become an honorary aunt to Mia and Elijah, who adored her quirky sense of humor and endless supply of homemade cookies. Marcus, too, grew fond of Carol, appreciating her dedication and willingness to step outside her comfort zone. Yet, Carol knew her work wasn't done. There would always be room for improvement, both within herself and the community. she remained, vigilant, challenging biases whenever she encountered them, not just in others but in herself as well. She attended conferences, read books, and joined online forums dedicated to promoting inclusivity, constantly seeking new ways to grow. And though there were days when doubt crept in, reminding her of past mistakes, she pushed forward, buoyed by the support of her neighbors and the belief that change was worth fighting for. As the seasons changed and years passed, the neighborhood continued to flourish. The Thompsons' home remained a hub of warmth and hospitality, welcoming visitors from all walks of life. Angela's books gained national recognition, inspiring classrooms and households across the country. Marcus's work at the hospital earned him accolades, but he remained humble, always prioritizing patient care above accolades. Together they served as living proof that compassion, resilience, and determination could overcome even the deepest divides. And Carol? She became a beacon of hope, not just in her neighborhood but in the wider community. Her story, a tale of prejudice turned into advocacy, was shared at schools, community centers, and conferences, encouraging others to confront their own biases and strive for change. People marveled at how far she had come, but Carol never took credit for the transformation. Instead, she credited the Thompsons, whose grace and forgiveness had opened her eyes, and her neighbors, whose openness and willingness to grow alongside her had made everything possible. In the end, the neighborhood wasn't just healed, it was transformed. Bonds forged during challenging times proved unbreakable, and the lessons learned rippled outward, touching lives far beyond its borders. What had once been a place defined by division and misunderstanding became a shining example of what could be achieved when people chose empathy over judgment, connection over isolation, and love over fear. And as Carol sat on her porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she smiled, knowing that the best was yet to come.